Hi friends, welcome to Amy Bakes. I'm Amy, and today we're going to be making a beautiful artisan style bread. The recipe is an easy no-knead bread, and we got that from damndelicious.net. We'll be sure to put the recipe in the description for you. For your supplies and your ingredients, you're going to need all-purpose flour, active dry yeast, kosher salt, spring water. You don't want to use tap or distilled water because it's got chlorine in it and it can affect the yeast. So spring water, and optional, a little bit of olive oil. For your supplies, you're going to need at least a 4.5 quart or 4 quart Dutch oven with a lid. The cast iron, I have the enameled cast iron one. You don't have to have the enameled, you could just have a regular cast iron. You're going to need a little bit of saran wrap, measuring cups for liquid and dry, measuring spoons, a thermometer, flour shaker if you want to use that. If not, you can just sprinkle the flour with your hand. You're going to need a bowl to put the bread in, or the dough rather. You're going to need a little bit of parchment paper, a lime or a very sharp knife if you don't have a lime, and some pot holders because this is going to be very hot when it comes out of the oven, and also a rack to put your bread on to cool. All right, so let's get started putting all this together. We're using 3 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour. We're going to use 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. We're going to use 3/4 teaspoon of dry active yeast. And then we're going to use 1 1/2 cups of warm spring water. And you want to make sure that you use a thermometer to gauge your temperature. You want that between 100 and 110. If you have it too hot, it will kill the yeast. If it's too cold, the yeast won't rise. We're going to mix all this together. And this part is where it gets fun. You just kind of stir it in, but then you're going to have to get your hands in there. This is going to be a very, very sticky dough. This is very different from breads that you, like loaf breads that you knead. This is very, very sticky. So now we're just going to have to get in there. So get in there with your hands and really just stir it in, squeeze it, and get all those dry bits. This recipe is actually why I started this page, because I started making these beautiful breads, these artisan style breads, and my friends were like, oh my gosh, I've got to have that recipe. And it was just easier to show how to make it instead of to just send the recipe, because they were contacting me with some questions. So I thought, well, you know what, I'll show you how to do it. So we're just going all around there. Now there are 2 ways that you can rise this. You can do this either as soon as you mix up your dough. You can go ahead and start rising it, and you'll need to rise it. The recipe says 6 to 8 hours, but I thought that was a little too much because it rose and then deflated. So I rise it for about 4 to 4.5 hours. So you can either do that, just put it in a warm place and rise it for 4 to 4.5 hours, or you can set it out on the counter and rise it for about 2 hours, and then you can put it in the fridge, and that's a cold rise method. That's actually my preferred method, because as you can see how sticky this dough is, when it is cold, it is much easier to handle. So once you get it mixed in, what you're going to do, if you want to, this is optional, just squirt the top of it with a little bit of olive oil or drizzle some olive oil on there. And you do that because it tends to dry out on the top layer as it's rising, because it rises for such a long time. So I'm going to wash my hands, and then okay, so I'm just going to spray the top of this with the olive oil. I like to kind of rub it in a little bit. There we go. Make sure the whole top is covered. Then we're just going to cover this with saran wrap. My preferred method of rising it is the cold method. So we're just going to cover this up with a saran wrap. And I'm going to put the lid on. And then we're gonna set this out on the counter for about 2 hours, and then I'm gonna move it to the refrigerator, and it can stay in the refrigerator up to 5 days. So the beauty of the cold rising method is that you can make up several batches of the dough and just store it in the fridge, and then when you're ready to bake, it's ready for you. So what I do is I have a little sticker up here, and I just cross it off, and today's the 19th. And then that way I know what day I made it. And so I have 2 in the fridge at all times. Then I can just pull the oldest one and start baking with it. Okay. This dough I pulled out of the refrigerator this morning, and I let it set out to room temperature. So what you're gonna do is just reach in and grab your dough. And see, it's still a very sticky dough. I'm just gonna pull that out. I'm trying to get it all out at once. Now, you're going to pull it and fold it onto itself. You're going to do that on all 4 corners. Pull it, fold it, pull it, fold it, pull it, fold it. I forgot to sprinkle my parchment paper with flour, so I'll do that in just a minute. So what we're going to do now is you're going to make this into a round. And so you're just going to pull the dough, and as sticky as this is, it is much stickier if you don't use the cold rise method. Now your dough doesn't look perfect, and that's okay. As it bakes, it's going to look perfect in the end, so you don't have to worry about that. If your dough's a little too sticky like this is, you can lightly flour your hands. So I think we're going to do that. Or you can actually get your hands a little wet. So we're going to lightly flour there. I'm going to lightly flour my hands. That'll help when I'm handling the dough. Okay, there we go. So we're just going to get this into a round. And again, don't worry about those little imperfections. All right, that's a little bit sticky. I might need to wet my hands for this one. Let's see if we can make this work. Here we go. All right. Let's set that down. Tuck that under a little bit. You know what? I think I am going to wet my hands real quick. All right. Wet my hands and see if that's a little bit easier to work with now. Here we go. Pull this up. Oh, yeah. That's not sticking nearly as bad. There we go. And remember, this is an easy recipe, so don't sweat the small stuff. There you go. Now we're just going to set that on there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cover this with a dish towel, a clean dish towel. We're going to cover it for 1 hour, and we're going to let it rise. While that is rising, we're going to go ahead and heat up the oven with the Dutch oven. And heat the oven to 450. And you're going to go ahead and put your Dutch oven inside. And you're going to want that to stay in that preheated oven for at least 30 minutes. For at least 30 minutes. So go ahead and put your Dutch oven in, preheat your oven, set your timer for an hour while your bread rises and your oven preheats. And we will be back in an hour. This has been rising for an hour. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut this with a lime. If you don't have a lime, you need a very sharp knife. And do be careful, because these are incredibly sharp. It's got a little drag on the bread that tells me it might be time to change my blade. Get that in there really good. Okay, so I'm going to do a cut on one side and just a light vine pattern on the other. Come back and match that. Okay, now we're going to pull the Dutch oven out. Okay, this is super hot. Be very, very careful taking this out. The recipe says that you could, if you want to cut it, to go ahead and you put it in the pot and then cut it. That pot is so hot, I'm so afraid that I might, as I'm cutting or as I'm close to it, I'm afraid I'm gonna hit my arm on the side of the pot. So I prefer to go ahead and score it here. And then we're just gonna lift this up like a sling, set it in. Now this is gonna cook in 2 parts. First with the lid on for 30 minutes. Okay, now let me put this in the oven with the lid on. We're going to cook that for 30 minutes. And then we're going to cook it with the lid on. Okay, it's been in for 30 minutes with the lid on. Now we're going to take that lid off. Give you a little sneak peek. Close that in, and we're going to put that with the lid off, and we're going to cook that. The recipe calls for 15 more minutes. My oven just cooks a little hot, so we're not going to do it for 15. I'm going to do it for about 8. Okay, we'll be back. It's been 8 more minutes. I'm going to pull that out. Oh, that looks beautiful. All right, now you just carefully lift this out and set that onto a rack to cool. And if you remember that there were slight imperfections in the bread while we were trying to shape it, but look how beautifully it rose. Here's the vine cut and then the large cut. Now, this loaf of bread cost me about 82 cents to make with all of the ingredients. And that is a tremendous savings over going to the store and purchasing one, because a artisan boule will run you somewhere between $4 and $6. So this is an incredible savings. This is my family's favorite bread. And this is the one that we make all of the time now. We go through about 3 to 5 loaves a week. So I will put the recipe as it was originally written from damndelicious.net in the description, and then I will make any changes that I made, I'll put in parentheses. I always recommend that you try the recipe exactly as written and then make alterations to however it suits you, or if your oven cooks different or whatever, but try it exactly as written and then go in and tweak it just a little bit. That's what I do with all of my recipes. We've cooled the bread now for 30 minutes and it is ready to cut and enjoy. I hope you see how easy it is to make a bakery quality product in your own home for a fraction of the price with just a few simple ingredients. If you have enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button, and if you make this recipe, leave me a comment. I'd love to know how yours turned out. I have a lot of great recipes that I would like to share with you. So if you would hit the subscribe button and the bell, then you'll be notified of any new videos when I upload them. Thanks for watching.